and welcome to this episode of Scroll Up, a Yeshiva University podcast. My name is Jordyn Kaufman, and I have the absolute pleasure of sitting with actor, writer, and director Stephen Tobolowsky. Stephen has acted in over 200 movies and TV shows, including Groundhog Day, Garfield, Silicon Valley, and my personal favorite, Freaky Friday. I just aged myself there, I know. He's written 2 movies, Stephen Tobolowsky's Birthday and The Primary Instinct, as well as 3 books, Cautionary Tales, The Dangerous Animals Club, and the one we're going to be speaking about today, My Adventures with God, which I have here. Stephen, thank you for coming and taking the time to be here with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So last year you wrote a book, My Adventures with God, where you sort of weave through numerous moments of faith you've had in your life. So let's start with something easy. What made you decide to write this book?
I had this terrible accident. This is how I became a writer, everyone out there who wants to write. I broke my neck in 6 places riding a horse on the side of an active volcano in Iceland. What could possibly have gone wrong there? My doctor told me I had a fatal injury, which is really awful to hear when you're a living patient. And at first I was terrified, and then I thought, oh, wait a minute. It's kind of inspirational. What if what the doctor said was true and I really died on that mountain? What are some of the stories of my life that I have not told my 2 boys? Maybe that I haven't even told my wife. So I thought, I'm going to use the time in which I was healing. I'm in one of these braces to write these true stories from my life. And then Simon & Schuster said, can we do a book of your stories? So out there, that's how you become a writer. You fall off of a horse and break your neck and don't die. That's the important part. You have to stay alive to write the book. And after the first book, Simon & Schuster said, well, we love your stories and we love the humor in the stories, but your stories seem to have this spiritual bent to them. Is it possible you could write a second book that's held together with a spiritual through line? And that became this guy, My Adventures with God. And so my editor, Ben Lonan, who's a brilliant guy, I just love Ben, he said, well, what is your book going to be? And I just made this up. And I felt so lucky that I made this up on this. I said, well, Ben, all of our lives, I think, at least my life and everyone's life I know, sort of follows the template of the Torah. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, we all have a Genesis. These are usually the first stories we tell on a first date with the first glass of Chardonnay about who we are, our families, our fears, our terrors, our aspirations. Then we all go into slavery, like Exodus, except we don't build pyramids. Some of us stay in graduate school forever. Then we all have a Leviticus moment, this moment in the middle of our life, which you'll be coming to. And you may have started it, by saying, when I came to faith, a moment in the middle of your life where you go, wait a minute, this is what I am. And this is when I came back to Judaism. This is when I got married. I became a father, my Leviticus moment. And then we are reshaped by grief. And you'll come to that too. And you lose friends and family, irreplaceable, and we are remade by mourning, like in the book of Numbers. And then if you're lucky, you get to the book of Deuteronomy, where you tell your stories to your children to try to make sense of what the whole journey was. And that became My Adventures with God.
You talk a lot in your book about, obviously, your adventures with God. And you reference, something that stuck out to me is you reference the word Israel actually means one who struggles with God. Yes. So personally, I don't believe that Judaism believes in blind faith, because we're constantly pushed to ask questions and to seek answers for ourselves. So how has wrestling with God and asking those questions and seeking out answers helped you strengthen your relationship both with God and with Judaism?
It's the core of it. It's the central piece of it, and it's the central question I get as I talk at different places around the country. One of the things that I'm certain of in my life is that in my life, almost everything I've known has been wrong. That's one thing I'm certain of. Whenever I see someone who's absolutely certain of something, I know that they may be good at answers, but they're not good at asking questions. And the power of faith comes from asking questions, not by spouting answers, because usually an answer will be incomplete or based on something that is not exactly true.
You quote your rabbi, Rabbi Klein, I think when you were about 6 years old, saying, quote, "Man always thinks he is rebuilding Eden. He ends up only building another Tower of Babel." So that's something that really, when I was reading through the book, really stuck out to me as something very striking of this image of we constantly think that we're recreating Eden and doing all this good, when in reality, we're just creating a Tower of Babel. So how do you think that that applies to us today in this world, in this modern circumstance, and how do we avoid that?
A friend of mine is working for Amazon now, and he was talking about all the new things Jeff Bezos is doing, and the next big things to be delivered to our home are groceries. This is the next big thing Amazon did. I said, so let me tell you about my upbringing in Texas in the 1950s. We had a milkman who delivered milk to our door. We had the baker, the manor man, who delivered baked goods to our door because my mother was at home, a housewife, working, and we had the grocery store deliver groceries to our door. So what Jeff Bezos has done is he's recreating the 50s and calling it the future. We do this over and over and over again, and we say it's progress, but we've done it before. We've done it all before. You have to take a look at what is real progress. Real progress is the way people treat each other. Can people treat each other with more honesty and truth? There's a difference between honesty and truth. Honesty you can use as a bludgeon to hit people over the head with. You got to be careful of honesty. Truth you got to be careful about, because once you say the truth, nothing is the same. So our fear of those two things keeps us from treating each other better. If you take a look at the Ten Commandments, that's a pretty sound way of building a good community, of not lying and honoring your parents. I think the true progress is with the human heart and refining the human soul. And that takes honesty and truth, and that's the difficulty there.
Something you mentioned in your book is that one of the directors you were working with when you had rehearsal, I believe, on Rosh Hashanah, he was very understanding when you said, I'm going to be in synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, so I can't be here. Do you generally find people in Hollywood to be open and understanding and accommodating of your faith?
No. Oh, that's a terse answer. But I got to say, when you're in show business, it's rough. Like I did a couple Broadway plays here. You're doing 8 shows a week. I remember we ran through Passover, ran over it. I think I had 2 shows on Passover. It was like, there's no way I'm going to have a Seder tonight. Sometimes you have to learn to pray on the road. And there's no way around it. And I've had some of my most meaningful experiences when I have to improvise and come to grips and create a holy moment in the middle of the desert.
You've worked with a ton of different directors, casts, a ton of different conditions. What kind of conditions do you like working in best?
Well, it all comes from the head. And that is, if you have a director who listens, who understands the material, who's compassionate to what your problems may be as an actor, that situation's going to be the best. If you have a director that's dictatorial, tells you exactly what they want to do, do this, move here on this, do this, it's going to be a rough situation. I know right now I'm doing One Day at a Time on Netflix, where we just finished our 3rd season, and it's the best show on television. It is wonderful. Our cast is the most wonderful I've ever worked with. It's delightful. I miss them every day now that we're not working together, and I never say that about a show. And we have the most wonderful directors.
I actually do a lot of directing, and the first thing I was taught was never tell an actor what to do. Always make sure that they think what you want them to do was their idea.
That is correct.
Yeah, so we learned
You
methods
well.
of asking like very leading questions to get them to know what you wanted them to do, but it was their idea. And then they want to do it, and it comes across as genuine as opposed to I'm walking here because someone told me to walk here.
One thing I do when I direct, and this is interesting, is I watch the actor's body. I watch their body language. And so I see if they if they kind of shift, I go, oh, you could stand up if you want. You know what's interesting about directing is that sometimes the mind controls the actor. Sometimes the body controls the actor, but sometimes the spirit controls the actor. And a good director, has to be able to see who's talking when they're saying the lines, which part of them is speaking.
You're obviously an avid and experienced storyteller with your books, and you have your podcast, The Tobolowsky Files, and you've also worked on a large variety of scripts. So what makes a compelling and successful story?
We don't know each other, do we?
We do not.
We just met?
We just met.
This is one of my new things. It's like you've been rummaging through my desk and looking at my notes. No, I think what makes a compelling story is knowing what is hidden and revealing it. I had this event happen to me that sort of made me realize it, in that I was having contractual problems on a show, and my agent was working it out. And I called up my agent, and I'm frantic about it because I think like I'm either going to be fired or be sued by CBS. And I called the agency, and the agent's assistant said, oh, Michael, I'm making up that name. Michael's just stepped away from the desk. He's not here right now, but I know he's working on this. Oh, just a second. And he pressed the mute button, but the mute button didn't press.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. And so the assistant says, it's Stephen Tobolowsky again. And then my agent goes, oh, no, that blah, 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 blah. Oh, just tell him I'm gone. Tell him whatever. He says, but I feel terrible. I feel like we're kicking him around like a football. We are kicking him around like a football. Look, we have a lot of contracts with CBS. We're not going to put them in danger with dealing with this guy. This guy's small potatoes. And I'm listening to all of this. And then the assistant comes back on, Stephen, Michael says that he's working on it, right? And I'm going like, okay, guys, I just want you to know that when you press the mute button didn't press. And I heard all of that. Just 1 second, Stephen. Press the mute button again. The mute button didn't press. And it didn't press again. And he goes, oh, no. So what makes the story compelling was the fact that I was able to hear what was hidden. That's what makes that story. And I think for all potential storytellers out there, find what is hidden and find how you want to reveal it, and that creates a story. My father-in-law was a businessman, and he said, Stephen, the only thing you need to know about someone you work with is, can you trust them? Because if you can't, it doesn't matter how big or small the issue is you're dealing with, you will always be in jeopardy. And I found it curious that in the Talmud, it says that the first thing that you are asked when you get to heaven is not, were you a good person? Were you a decent, were you kind to animals? But were you honest in business?
In your book, you talk obviously about the difficult journey of moving out to Hollywood and struggling a little bit before you were able to make it and be as successful as you are today. And it seems like with your faith also, it's been a little bit of a rockier journey. So my question is, was it worth it?
Yes. Now that's a short answer, but it's yes. I think everything that's good to me came from making the journey, not necessarily to Los Angeles, but having the nerve to make the journey. I find a lot of people that I teach, a lot of people I work with, never had the courage to make the journey. It's the courage that opens the door, not necessarily which journey you take. Whether it's falling in love, or pursuing a dream, the courage that it takes to do that is what opens the door. And it's also that courage that enables you to hold on to faith in difficult times.
Thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure.
It was an absolute pleasure. And we can't wait to see what more you come up with.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for reading the book. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching. For our full interview with Stephen, you can find Yeshiva University Scroll Up Podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you for listening.